Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, a lot going on in the Luigi Mangione case. We've been hearing so much about it, but this morning, Luigi has waived extradition, and he has taken a private jet. That's the first time I ever saw a perp take a private jet on an alleged perpetrator. Take a private jet from Pennsylvania, which I guess is about a 4-hour drive, fly it out to, it must have been Republic Airport in Farmingdale, Long Island. Then he was picked up by an NYPD helicopter, and he was flown to the Wall Street heliport. And from there, he went into a transport van, and he would be delivered, I believe, to 26 Federal Plaza if he wasn't delivered to Pearl Street. But it seems like the feds are getting a bite at this apple. And our prediction on this show is that this case is going to become a federal case, and it won't even be prosecuted by the state. So there's a lot of politics involved in that. But so many different things going on, right? So much movement. And we're going to discuss this today with our all-star panel. I don't know if you've noticed, I'm back in New York, guys. I flew in from Florida last night. I'm back in New York. I didn't take a private jet. I took the old JetBlue to Westchester Airport. But here I am back in New York. Anyway, folks, hold on to your hats. Hold on to your seats. Hold on to your loved ones. Hold on to your cup of coffee. Hold on to your wig. Hold on to your toupee, because you're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now, a word from our sponsor. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA and college basketball, NHL to UFC. Head to BetOnline today and don't forget to use promo code BLEAV, BELIEVE, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. Folks, we're going to get right into this show, and I have two co-hosts with me today. Two of the best co-hosts in 2024. They're going into 2025, 1 year older, with 1 year more experienced being part of the Police Off the Cuff family. First, retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, attorney. Welcome to the show, Professor Michael Geary. Welcome, Mike.
Bill, good afternoon. Good to see you. Thank you for having me on.
It's good to see you too. And a real surprise today, because I never can tell if I can get a hold of him on his travels all over Brooklyn. But he was available. He was listening. He was plugged in. Retired NYPD detective and straight out of Brooklyn. Welcome to the show, Phil Grimaldi. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you for having me. And it's great to be here on this case on the latest developments. How you doing, Mike? Good afternoon.
Hey, good to see you, Bill.
So, guys, Mike, specifically, I want to go to you first. First of all, I never saw so much fanfare in delivering one suspect back from another jurisdiction. And it was expected that he was going to waive extradition. In fact, that was the strategy of his current attorney, Karen Friedman Agnifilo. She wanted to waive extradition and get this thing going, where his Pennsylvania attorney seemed to want to fight extradition. Your thoughts about that, Mike?
Yeah, Bill, I think Ms. Agnifilo, she wants the case in New York as quick as possible. She wants to help with his defense. Obviously, she's a defense attorney. She has to prepare the defense. I don't think she's expecting to go to federal court, but she was expecting to work in Manhattan Supreme Court and New York Supreme Court because that's where she's from. She worked many years there. She knows all the judges. She knows all the attorneys. Any favors that she can get, anything that she can do for her client, she's going to do for her client. And therefore, she wants him back in New York. Mr. Dickey, he wants to fight extradition because he knows he's not going to be working on the case very long, and he wants to make a big show of it in Pennsylvania. But luckily, someone prevailed upon him not to do that because it's going to go to New York. When you talk about extradition law between states, there's almost really the grounds for fighting extradition are so narrow. And in the end of the day, you know that he's going to be in New York State. Ms. Agnifilo, she wants to get this case. She wants to get her defense started as soon as she can. She can't do that if he's, 250 miles away. She wants him in New York where she can see him and she could work on this defense. And she's doing the best she can. She's advocating for her client. So therefore, as far as she's concerned, it's good that he is in New York as fast as he got here.
Mike and Phil, this was the scene in Pennsylvania a couple hours ago. Not a very steady camera person. Phil, what was the rush to get him to New York this quickly that they had to put him on a private jet? I mean, I've never seen that before. I really haven't.
Well, I think that the fact that it's 4 hours away driving and with all the media attention, I think it was the best way to go. And Bill, I don't know if you saw it, but while he was in court early this morning in Pennsylvania, there were protesters outside of the courthouse. There wasn't many of them, but there was a handful, and they were holding up signs, "Free Luigi," and some other things. I mean, really, really absurd that someone would want to stand up for a person that killed the CEO of the healthcare, in such cold blood and in such a cold manner. The perpetrator in this case, Luigi, obviously has some mental health issues going on. But to stand there with a sign and say "Free Luigi" when he cold-bloodedly pumped several bullets from a 9mm handgun into the back of the CEO, Brian Thompson from United Healthcare, I mean, that's really, really absurd. So I think the fanfare, the media crush was cut back by transporting him with the plane and then taking the helicopter. They brought him into Lower Manhattan. We believe what I've seen, the news reports that I've seen, he's going into federal court. This case is going in a federal lane, which I like the idea of that. I'll explain my feelings on that when we get a little bit further into it. But I believe he's going to federal court first. Perhaps there may be some type of a hearing within state court, but this looks like it's going straight forward, 100 miles an hour into the federal system, and I'm all for that.
I agree. Maui Swift, thank you so much. Maui just gifted 5 police off-the-cuff memberships to 5 lucky people. Maui's been a supporter, a fan of Police Off the Cuff, probably for over 4 years. Maui, thank you so much for your support. Very much appreciated. There was someone made a really good comment. Sherry, Luigi made a human sacrifice out of his terroristic homicidal ideations. He had some indication of being interested in bombs. Well, I think he said he didn't want to use a bomb because he didn't want to kill any innocent people. But instead, he shot someone in the back. Dorothy Navarro, could they be charging the death penalty?
Yes.
I thought it was a district case, so no more brag. Now it will be a Fed prosecution. Dorothy, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, if the feds prosecute this case, it is a death penalty case. Absolutely. However, I don't know if the state is going to just surrender this case. I think they're going to fight. But we all know what's happening on January 21st, though. There's a new administration. An administration that doesn't think very highly of Alvin Bragg. So the power of the feds to take this case is even stronger after January 21st. Of course, the state wants this case. This happened in New York City, in 54th Street in Midtown. The NYPD has done almost all the work on this, of course, with an assist from the FBI and other police organizations. However, 80% of the work on this case was performed by NYPD detectives. So they're not going to just want to give this case up at all. They want to go forward with it. However, the feds are very powerful. And if they decide to take this case, I don't think the state's going to have a prayer in fighting them. Professor Mike.
Bill, I agree. Alvin Bragg wants this case because this is a feather in his cap, because he feels he can successfully prosecute this case. They've got a lot of information on this guy with the DNA, the fingerprints. You've got the manifesto. You got the firearm. You got the pictures of him. So you got all of that sort of information that you could use. It's not a shaky case whatsoever. And so he wants to prosecute this case. This is probably the biggest profile case he's done recently. And so he wants it very badly. And you got to remember, Mangione was supposed to be arraigned in New York City Court, Manhattan Supreme Court, on the indictment for murder from Pennsylvania. So that's big. Bragg wants all that face time. Eric Adams, the mayor, wants all that face time. The police commissioner wants all that face time. They want this case very badly. However, no matter what happens, even if they prosecute this case and he gets sentenced, the most he can get is life behind bars without possibility of parole. The feds have their reasons for wanting this case. You, me, and Phil talked about this a couple of days ago. The fact that he crossed jurisdictional boundaries from New York into New Jersey into Pennsylvania, that suddenly makes this a federal jurisdiction case, and the feds could exert supremacy over New York and take this case. And they have their political reasons for wanting to do this. And you know what? For Bragg, who knows? Maybe he wouldn't mind, depending on what they're going to do, what deal they're going to work out. Because now, if the feds prosecute this case, it's a death penalty case. And so this Mangione could end up like Tsarnaev on death row, out in Colorado awaiting execution. But a lot of behind the scenes politics and maneuvering at this point in the case.
Mike, many people, even in the chat, Maui Swift is saying Bragg, a terrible DA. Maui, I happen to agree with you. Rick Raguso, Bragg is a major bozo. Bragg doesn't like to prosecute anyone. All of a sudden he's a prosecutor. Turn on the TV cameras, turn on the lights, he's a prosecutor. Otherwise, he cuts more people loose than you can absolutely imagine. Let me play this from CNN. This was earlier.
The back of this a police SUV, and he is now being driven off out of that courthouse in Pennsylvania. That is just happening now. It is happening as you're watching it.
So this was earlier this morning when they took him from the courthouse in Pennsylvania. He waived extradition, and they took him to the airport in Pennsylvania in a private jet that flew.
The suspect in the murder of Brian Thompson, the healthcare CEO at United Healthcare. That is Luigi Mangione right now in the back of that police SUV, presumably on his way back to New York, as he has just waived his right to, protesting extradition. And he is now going to be extradited to the state of New York. And so you're watching that unfold as we speak. Danny Freeman, if you're still there, Danny, what can you tell us? What are you seeing?
Yeah, Jim, I'll just say that you can see on your screens right now, this is the New York plates, black SUV. We just saw Luigi Mangione get into the back seat, and you can see with the help of some local officials, including Pennsylvania State Police, they are taking Luigi Mangione away from the courthouse, presumably to be now on his way to New York. I got to say, I'm pretty stunned that this happened as quickly as it did. I mean, it was only a few moments ago, Jim, that we were inside of that courthouse, and that extradition waiver was officially signed by the judge, by Luigi, by his attorney, and approved by the DA's office as well. And again, only a matter of minutes, less than a half hour after that, there he was getting into that black SUV with New York plates on his way, presumably back to New York to face these much more serious murder charges that we we've been talking about for the better part of the past couple of days or so. And I'll just tell you, I mean, this is an alley that is not used to this much media presence. You can see the roads have been closed off, but there are also, you can see down the street, Jim, there are people who are just there to watch this process play out. Ordinary people watching Luigi Mangione be extradited back to New York.
Yeah, and Danny, you were watching all of this while I was talking to Shimon a few moments ago. Did he have any kind of an outburst as he was coming out of the courthouse like we saw the other day, or this was pretty much getting into the back of that SUV and off he went?
No. Amazingly, Jim, as you saw, it was basically as we did. It was quiet. It was without.
His attorneys have gotten to him. His attorneys had told him to shut your mouth. Stop making a spectacle. You're just going to make it worse for yourself. This is not a cause celeb. This is your life. And you keep opening up your mouth like you think you're some 60s radical. It's only going to hurt your case. Professor Mike.
Yeah, Bill, this is business now. Before, he's all pumped up. He wants to be righteous. He wants to let people know that he's strong, that he did this for a reason. When he was taken a couple of days ago, we saw him getting removed from that police SUV and going into the jail. He's pumped up. He wants to let everybody know he's a man on a mission. He's not just a cold-blooded killer. He's doing this for the people, kind of thing. And they have to talk to the attorney. This is what I remember being told in law school. If you're a criminal defense attorney, the best thing you can do is tell your client to shut their mouth. And that's what they've told him to do. He's not going to say a word. He's not going to release any sort of public manifesto from behind bars, nothing like that. You're not going to hear a peep out of this guy. His attorney will do all the talking, and that's the way it should be. So he's obviously learned his lesson.
Mike, what do you think the chances are that outburst is going to be played in court? I mean, that was a spontaneous statement, and that could clearly be used against him when he said that this is a real life incident and it's an insult to the American people. That's showing that he was for what took place, in my opinion. Yeah. And I think that that's very prejudicial to him. Of course, his attorneys had to tell him, no more outbursts. You're just making it worse for yourself. And I think that news clip is going to be played in court at his trial.
It goes to his state of mind. What was he thinking? Yeah, exactly.
Mike and Phil, you've seen this too. On the right, you see the photo of a, gung-ho activist shouting out, and then you see him 2 days later after tasting cheese sandwiches and water in his cell. And
wait till he gets to Rikers.
Yeah, wait till he gets a taste of Rikers Island. He's not going to be so arrogant and, Viva la France type thing. He's not going to be, actively, shouting out. First of all, his attorney, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, who we see in this picture right here, she's an excellent attorney. She undoubtedly, if she hasn't spoken to him one-on-one via the telephone, she's spoken to his attorney from Pennsylvania and said, listen, chill him out. Tell him to stop the bullshit because it's just going to make it worse. So his cousin Vinny, attorney from Pennsylvania, probably got to him and said, "Hey, you got to chill, man."
I'm laughing because she said that, and that guy really came off like a cousin Vinny type attorney. But listen, if he comes to New York and he winds up in either Rikers or if he winds up in a federal detention facility, either one of them is not good. He's going to get a real reality check. But going back to what we were talking about earlier, with regard to the federal charges, the reason I like this case going in a federal lane is because the investigation is going to widen. The scope of the investigation will become much wider. Now, we know that there's a lot of evidence that needs to be examined, probably by the FBI, that the NYPD was going to enlist their help to begin with. So now it makes it a little easier. Search warrants, the technical part of it, subpoenas, the technical people, the analysts that are going to analyze the evidence. Now it's a little bit easier. It gets a little bit more priority when it's a federal case. Those people are now going to examine his laptop, his cell phone, things of that nature. What a priority. It's a federal case now, so I think that that's going to be good. Now, when I talked about the widening of the investigation, the scope, when you throw out a net, I'm going to use a fishing analogy. When you throw out a net and you use a small net, you can't catch all the fish in the ocean. But when you have a much wider net, when you have a federal jurisdiction that's going to be able to go anywhere in the country to investigate this case, perhaps there's going to be other people involved. And we talked about the indoctrination of this young man. What caused him to be indoctrinated with this belief against healthcare companies and insurance companies? We know by what's been already reported, there was no direct contact between him or his family with regard to United Healthcare. What made him go against this CEO of this insurance company? So he was radicalized. It's being carried as a terrorist act and activity. It probably does fall into that lane. But either way, I like the fact that we have a federal, the federal system is going to be investigating this case. It's going to be trying this case. It's going to be a much more thorough investigation. Obviously, NYPD is going to be in it from the beginning. They're going to work hand in hand with the feds. Would we like to hold on to it ourselves? Of course we would, but I think that it's going to be much better served if this case goes into that federal lane and goes into a federal court. It's going to be something to see what develops with this investigation.
Mike Geary, I think that I'm calling you Mike Geary because Mike Vecchione was on the other night, and I had two mics on, so I had to differentiate. Professor Mike from former district attorney, assistant district attorney Michael Vecchione. Who can do a better job, and who is more likely to get a higher charge conviction in this case, the state or the federal government? Do you think, Mike?
Bill, I tell you, when you look at what Mangione did with his little 2-page, memorandum, whatever you want to call it, dossier, thought process, jumble, whatever it is, manifesto, he got himself into federal court. If he had never wrote those words down, he never did that at all. This would be totally an NYPD case, totally New York State case, totally Manhattan District Attorney case, totally Manhattan court case. He opened up his mouth. He wrote down his thoughts, these whatever you want to call them. He wrote it down. That gave the federal government the jurisdiction to come in. And then also responded because he talked about healthcare. Then he got onto public transportation, went across state lines. So now they got that hook. And so that gives them jurisdiction. And with the supremacy clause, they're going to get this case if they want it. Honestly, I think I got to agree with Phil. I mean, nobody likes, we're all NYPD cops. We don't like the FBI coming in and asserting jurisdiction over us. But on the other hand, they do have the death penalty. And, if this guy is the tip of an iceberg of some other like-minded people, or even a group of other like-minded people, then I think it belongs in federal court, where you can hold the death penalty as like the sword of Damocles hanging over the head. Don't you dare do this kind of stuff. We don't go for this in this country. And so I think because you also in federal court get a larger get a larger group of people to pick a jury from, rather than just Manhattan people, you're going to get people all in the Southern District. It's going to be Manhattan. It's going to be Bronx. It's going to be Westchester, that sort of thing. I think you stand a better chance if you're a prosecutor to get a guilty verdict in the Southern District.
Better jury pool for sure, Mike.
Yes,
jury
definitely.
pool for sure.
And Mike, the other thing, aren't the rules of evidence much more lax in a federal case than they are in a state case?
I'm not sure. I've never been in a federal court other than to pick up a prisoner, so I can't really give you any sort of good information on that. But I will say, I think for Agnifolo's sake, she would much rather be in state court because she has practiced her law in New York State. I don't know, under New York State laws, I don't know if she's done a lot in federal court. I think in federal court, it's like one thing. The good attorneys know the rules. The great attorneys know all the exceptions to the rules. So I think she would rather be in her home court where she knows the law and laws of evidence on the back of her hand. In federal court, there's going to be some quirks that maybe she's not really that familiar with. I would think she would hire someone to second seat her who knows federal evidentiary law better than she does.
Mike, if I was still on the NYPD, I would be fighting tooth and nail to keep this case for the state. I would be cursing out the FBI every which way but Sunday. But when we're looking from the outside in, and you see potentially also the resources that will be necessary to prosecute this case. Not that the Manhattan DA's office doesn't have the resources, they do, but the feds have bigger resources. And this case is just, it takes a lot of a political view at some of the things that he's being charged with. Could a jury sympathize with him? And the answer is yes, they could. I mean, we're seeing 40% of young people think he should be found innocent. They actually sympathize with him. I find that disturbing. But we're talking 40%. Phil, I can see you chomping at the bit. Want to comment on this?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the fact that my interaction with the federal system, when I was in the robbery identification program back in the 80s, I had a bank robbery case, and the threshold of what you needed to get an arrest was a lot lower. We only needed a photo ID of a person to charge them, whereas in the state, we would need a lineup. So there was a little bit of a different threshold. The threshold was less in the federal system. Now, I don't know how that's going to play into this specific case with regard to what thresholds are going to be met. I mean, there's a ton of evidence here that's going to be able to be brought out in court to finger Luigi. I mean, the DNA, the fingerprints, all the video evidence, there's so much here. But like I said, the thresholds seem to be not as high in federal court as it is in state court. So, Bill, I agree. I would probably want to keep the case myself if I was the case detective, keep it in state court, so we would have a little bit more of, let's say, control over it. But when you look at the big picture, I think the proper thing to do with this case, because it may have a lot of other tentacles, you know, Luigi was what we feel indoctrinated or radicalized on this belief system against the insurance industry, specifically the healthcare insurance industry, targeting maybe other CEOs. So I want to know, through the federal system, we might get a better idea of what that really is all about. And I think that with the much more stringent penalties, like the death penalty, this might put more of a buffer between people that want to get involved in this and say, you know what, I'm not going to get involved in this. I could wind up with the death penalty. So it needs to play out. And I think, in my opinion, this is going in the right lane, going in the federal system. Of course, we want to hold on to it as much as we can. But I think that the proper avenue for this case to be prosecuted is definitely the federal court system.
Absolutely. Julia Nielsen. This is like getting disturbing to me, man. There's too many people loving Mike on this show, you know?
Oh, nice. I got another fan. That's 3.
Julia Nielsen, great show, especially Mike. Oh, my God. Mike's going to have to get his own show one of these days. Sherry B., that's a ridiculous legend in Luigi's delusions of grandeur. Canuck 54, confused about a federal charge. Why would Luigi Mangione be charged federally? Mike, you want to explain that?
Okay, the federal charges are almost identical to the state charges because you're dealing with the premeditated killing of an individual. Okay, so in that way, they're duplicative. However, the federal charge for what he did also involves killing and then using an interstate transportation, manner, like a train, a bus, and that gives the feds jurisdiction to come into this case. So it's not exactly the same charge. It's very, very similar, but there are other elements that the feds have to prove in federal court than the Manhattan DA would have to prove in state court. In Manhattan, doesn't matter that he took a train or a bus or an airplane to get out of New York City. It doesn't matter whatsoever. It's irrelevant. What matters for the feds is that he took a transportation way to get out of New York, either bus, train, that sort of plane, that sort of thing. So,
Mike, doesn't it really involve the fact that he intended to kill Brian Thompson and he traveled from another state to do it, and that's where the federal charge comes in. No?
Yeah. Anytime you use any sort of interstate transportation, railroad, bus, whatever it happens to be, and you're going across state lines, that gives the hook for the feds to take over the case because he used it to get in and he used it to get out. And so they're going to have to prove that little element that's different from the element of murder in New York State.
You know, Mike, just so people understand in the chat, this doesn't exclude the NYPD. They're still the ones that did this, the foundation of this investigation. The arresting officer is a detective with the NYPD. He will still be the arresting officer. However, what differs about this is that the case would be prosecuted in the federal courts. And someone just said in the chat that Karen Agnifilo has a great deal of competence in both state and federal court. No doubt she does. She's an experienced jurist, and I'm sure that look, the law firm that she works for also is Garagos law firm. And I think that there's plenty of other attorneys that will help her prosecute this case. This is not a one attorney defense case. Excuse me, I meant a defense case. There's plenty of other attorneys that will assist her. She's not going to go this to represent Luigi Mangione as a lone wolf. She's going to have help because the feds will also have numerous federal prosecutors prosecuting this case. Phil.
Yeah, Mike, I had a question that you might be able to answer. I know that there's a statute in the federal law where if it's a conspiracy, I forgot what they call it. If there's a conspiracy to commit murder with one or more persons, two or more people involved, then that would also fall under this federal guideline. I forget if it's called a Wagner charge or something of that nature. Does that sound familiar to you, Mike?
No, it doesn't. I mean, feds do have conspiracy charges, just like the state. But I've not heard of the Wagner.
It's not Wagner. It's something like that. It's a clause in the federal law. I had dealing with it back in 2016 with a murder case, and the feds were trying to hold on to the case if they could prove that there was someone else involved. They knew who the murderer was. If there was someone else involved, then they could have kept it in federal court. And they weren't able to keep it in federal court. They had to give it to state courts. They only had enough evidence on the one individual. So I'm not sure what the statute's called, but I'm going to try and look it up.
Musical Neptunian, federal charges against Luigi Mangione, federal stalking, use of interstate facilities, stalking, travel and interstate commerce, murder through use of a firearms offense. Don't forget that was also a firearm without a serial number.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a forged instrument also, because a firearm is required to be legal, to have a serial number. Retired Sergeant Melinda, God is good. I find it funny how all of these people out there on the streets holding these signs to free him, but all have their faces covered. You know, Sergeant Melinda, maybe they're not proud of themselves.
Yeah, good point.
They're covering their face, you know.
Hey, Bill, can I make a quick point?
Go ahead.
About the viewer who talked about the firearm. You know, it's a firearm that is not made in a factory like Colt or Smith & Wesson. It's a 3D printed gun that runs afoul of federal law. And you know, the ATF would be the kind of investigating agency, and any kind of allegations that somebody's making these guns and selling them, you know, to mysterious people. That's a whole other investigation that's going to happen. That's going to be have its genesis in the Mangione case. So therefore, even just that alone would make this a federal case. Just having that federally prohibited firearm brings this case into federal court.
Absolutely. Bob Gable, will he face the death penalty in federal court? He is eligible for the death penalty. I'm not saying they're going to necessarily go for it, but they always have that as a bargaining chip. The feds could say to his attorneys, look, we want to know who made that gun for him. You want to take the death penalty off the table? We want some cooperation. You know, we want to know who else was involved in it with him. I'm not saying his attorney's going to say, we're going to cooperate, we're going to tell you, but they at least have that bargaining chip of the death penalty, where that's not true in the state court. New York used to have the death penalty. I forgot what year it was taken off the books, but we used to have it. And it was taken off the books probably over 20 years ago.
Governor Cuomo, the father, Mario Cuomo, was the one that took it off the books, I believe.
Is that the guy they named the bridge after?
No, yes, exactly. That's I think they took the name down after the son was taken down as well. But the whole thing with the death penalty, if you're sitting in a room and you're talking to someone that's either convicted or going to be tried for a crime, and you're telling them, that you're facing the needle, you're facing death, I think that puts a whole different outlook on what the future is going to be for that person, because maybe there are people that think, well, jail isn't going to be so bad. I could do this, I could do that. And jails today, especially federal system jails, there's a lot of things that they have, a lot of privileges, computers, access to things of that nature. So now you're talking about, no, you're not facing the rest of your life in jail where you can, go out in the field and play soccer or whatever it is. You're facing death penalty. So puts a whole different mental state on the person that's being faced with that. And I think that, like you said, Billy, if there is perhaps someone else involved, or the scope of the investigation widens, cooperation on his end could very well be, put to him. You're facing the death penalty. However, if you cooperate, or you're willing to testify, you're willing to give information, that could be a bargaining chip somewhere down the line for sure.
Phil, I may have to resign my position as a commanding officer of police off the cuff here. Here's another from across the pond. I'm a big fan from across the pond, South Australia, of Professor Mike. That's twice in one show. What's going on here?
4 fans. I have 4 now. Thank you very, very much.
It's really impressive that we have people from all over the world. Australia, I saw one earlier. I think it was Sweden. So we have a lot of fans all over the world, which I implore and I love it. And that's what keeps our show going. So
Phil, they're all loving Professor Mike. What's going on here?
We'll take it, Billy. We'll take it.
That's true. Railvin, I think he was anti-Western healthcare overall. He lived in a commune-style arrangement in Hawaii where natural healing was favored over traditional medicine. That is what we saw the other night. It was called the group called Surf Break. And Surf Break was run by this individual, R.J. Martin, who also ran the book club that they had in Surf Break. And we found that a little bit suspicious, because the book that he chose was the Ted Kaczynski novel. And that sort of got to Luigi Mangione, and he even quoted it. And I'm a little suspect of that. And we discussed that the other night. We were a little, I don't know. And we felt that this individual here, who is a PhD in philosophy, Mr. R.J. Martin, who uses a lot of words like community and healing and, leave things better than you found them. It just sort of lit up a light bulb in my skull that could he have been radicalized?
Absolutely, Billy. And one of the interviews I saw with R.J. Martin, where he said that Luigi and I had long conversations about how in the 60s, the country went off the rails into the wrong direction, and it needed to be changed. There needed to be change in the future because it had been going in a very destructive direction for many years. That's not verbatim what he said, but somewhere close to what he was saying. So that really set off a red flag for me. This guy was talking radical to me. That was a radical statement. The country's in the wrong direction since the 60s, and you had long conversations with Luigi about it, about how it needed to be put back on track. And something like this that's going to be so publicized, the killing of a CEO of United Healthcare, that all kind of falls into that radical belief to me. And I would like to know, like you just said, Billy, the Ted Kaczynski book was recommended to Luigi. He quotes about it on that online chat regarding the book club. What else did they talk about? That's what I'd like to know. I think that if he wasn't interviewed, he should definitely be interviewed at great length.
Absolutely. From the chat, Sherry B. It checked every box, one of a number of entries in a notebook in which the suspect discussed the plot in the weeks before the brazen crime, according to a federal criminal complaint. Yeah, I mean, there's so much more that we don't know that we're going to find out in the next few weeks. Carol Grayston, thank you so much for your generosity. Carol just gifted another 5 police off the cuff memberships. Thank you so much. And thank you on behalf of the people that are being gifted those 5 police off the cuff memberships. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff. Real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up. Ring that bell. Share us with your friends and your family. Hit that like button. And if you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels, and we have a YouTube channel membership with, count them, 5 different levels. And we appreciate our friends, our family, and all you police off the cuff members who have supported this channel for almost 5 years now. And we appreciate all of you guys. And we're excited about 2025. We took a huge burst of growth in the month of December here. And I think even unexcitable Professor Mike is getting excited, and Phil's always excited. So that was nothing different. This is what it looked like a couple of hours ago. So they took him from the Wall Street heliport down to, they already are downtown, but they took him to, I believe, 26 Federal Plaza, where he's going to spend the night apparently on Rikers Island. Cheese sandwiches and he'll have his own cell. I don't think they'll risk putting him in with any other inmates, because he's a risk to get attacked by. He's a high-profile prisoner. And they're not going to risk putting him in general population. Phil?
Yeah, I think he'll definitely be segregated. However, he will definitely also be terrorized. He's going to be facing real criminals. Those jails are full of some very, very violent people, violent individuals, people that are also deranged. Whether it be Rikers Island or if it's the federal system, I think they call it there's one in Manhattan, there's one in Brooklyn, the Metropolitan Correctional Facilities. P. Diddy happens to be in the one in Brooklyn, so he's not going to be treated with kid gloves, so to speak. He probably will, as we said, be segregated because he is a high-profile defendant. But it's going to be terrorizing. It's not going to be an easy time. Anybody that gets arrested and is waiting trial, they usually can't wait to get to either an upstate federal state prison or a federal prison, because it's a lot different than that. The feds, if there is any kind of a bail application, it'll probably be millions and millions and millions of dollars. But I think he's just going to be remanded.
No, absolutely, he's going to be remanded. There's absolutely, as you said, Phil, there's no chance of bail in this case. But I also want to talk about when we think about who he was, who he is, Luigi Mangione, 26 years old, right? Young man, right? We can't help but, because we're old guys, we can't help but calling him a kid, right? To us, he's a kid because.
Speak for yourself, Billy. Speak for yourself.
I have 2 sons older than him, 30 and 32, and I call them my kids. You always call them your kids.
Yeah.
But he's a kid, and he made a very bad, not a decision that was made at the spur of the moment. He planned it. He thought of it. He did plan this thing probably over months, and reconned it and researched it. And so how do we or other citizens feel sorry for him? And I understand everyone's demonizing the healthcare business. And we spoke about that the other night with Michael Vecchione. Look, we all agree the healthcare system in this country is a disaster, and we happen to be lucky. We were provided with good health care from our job that we all worked varying amount of years at. But many people don't have that. And they're paying thousands and thousands of dollars a year for health care that's not even as good as ours.
And then they're turned down for specific treatment. I mean, that's kind of, messed up.
Phil, what I'm getting to is I understand the anger. I do. But that doesn't ever give you the right to get a gun. And the lowest thing you can do, right back to Western times of cowboys in gunfights, is to shoot someone in the back. That is the lowest thing any human being can do to another. Well, there's other bad things, but that was one of the lowest things you could do. Professor Mike.
Yeah, Bill, nobody's blaming him for being angry at the healthcare system. We all have some, City Hall, you can't fight City Hall. The automobile industry, Major League Sports, whatever, whatever large corporation that's nameless, faceless, people have problems with. We all do, no matter what country you're in. The political party, Washington, D.C., the U.S. government, the ATF, the FBI, the CIA, whatever it happens to be, people always are like, these people suck. I hate them. They need to be changed, whatever. And that's fine. And that's totally reasonable. Everybody gets it. And so you could talk philosophically about these things, and you could vote for people who you think will, be a proponent of your views. That's great. The saddest thing is that when he was planning this, he didn't plan this overnight, and he was still pumped up from the night before. This took weeks and maybe several months. And so at what point did he have any sort of self-reflection to say, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? How deep and how angry was his righteousness that he thought this was a good thing? It would have been so much better if he had gotten to Manhattan and saw Mr. Thompson. If he saw Mr. Thompson walk by and say, I can't do this to somebody. I can't. What am I doing here? It's 6:45 in the morning and I have a firearm in my pocket. Like, what am I doing here? That never seemed to cross his mind. And we're all the worst for it. Everybody. He affected so many people. He's affected the family, himself, Mr. Thompson's family. This is ridiculous what he did. And so to take it from thinking about things and, okay, I'll do something constructive, to I'm going to put that burden on myself and I'm going to kill someone. This is how I think I will resolve the problem. It would have been better off if he had chickened out and said, I can't do this. At some point before he pulled that trigger at 6:44 in the morning, if he had backed out and said, what the hell have I been thinking? But he didn't. And so therefore, he's changed so many lives for the worse.
Well, Mike, getting back to your point, and Phil and I have discussed this, and you and I have discussed this. Phil, did he act alone?
Well, I guess that remains to be seen. It doesn't seem like it, because we have all the different indicators, like how did the bike wind up where it was in that alleyway across the street from the location where the shooting took place. We know he came out of the subway. We have videotaped evidence of that. He's coming out of the subway minutes before the shooting takes place. However, he gets a hold of a bike. The bike is placed there. Then he leaves on that bike. He drops the cell phone. The water bottle is left behind. And then he's into the park. He specifically leaves the backpack to be found. That's my belief. That backpack was not hidden in any way, shape, or form. It was just thrown. It could have been covered up. There were plenty of leaves in the area. Could have been buried or covered up. It was left to be found. Then he exits the park on the bike in the I think it was 85th Street area of Central Park, and he drives away. Where did the bike go? Where did it come from? So it seems very much so that there were indicators that there could be someone helping him in this case. As I said previously, could be direct help, indirect help, and then putting the plan together. He lives far away from New York City. Had he ever been in New York City before? He obviously came in 10 days ahead of time. He went right to the location of the New York Hilton to recon the location, as we said. But it does seem like he spent time in New York City. Who was he with? He didn't stay by himself the whole time. I find that a little odd and strange to believe. So what did he talk about when he was in Hawaii, when he was in that location where the Surfer Club? What did he talk about then? So all of these things need to be determined. And I'm just happy that this is going into the federal lane, federal prosecution. As I said before, I think a lot more is going to be uncovered. And in my feeling, and I think Bill, you and probably Mike as well, we feel that he didn't act alone. There has to be someone that helped him. He got too far too quickly, and he carried out what would, look like a professional hit. Obviously it wasn't, but did he do it all by himself? And to think that there's this undercurrent on the internet of people that are supporting him. My own daughter said to me the other day, you know, Dad, is the guy that he killed, was he a bad guy? She's asking me about that. I go, why do you think that? Well, that's what they're saying online, in chat rooms on Instagram and TikTok, things of that nature. And I explained to her, no, he was the head of a company. There was problems with the healthcare industry. He was the head. That's why he was targeted. But everyday people, they're not going to dig that deeply, and they're going to think this guy was a bad guy, and they're putting that out there, and it's not the case. Like you said, Billy, shot in the back, there's nothing more cowardice than shooting someone in the back. If he had real, I don't want to use the word, what I was going to use, but if he had real nerve, maybe he would have faced him and gotten up close and then maybe did something that would have taken a little bit more guts, I think. It was very cowardice. It was disgusting. And I think that anybody that supports him, they better take a look in the mirror. This is not something to support.
Rose Belizia, I saw a video about Louis Mangione merch, hats, shirts, posters, holy candles, balloons. Sick, right? Pretty sick. It's like
really
almost the equivalent of you get people down by Ground Zero who were selling souvenirs down there. 6 months after the occurrence, they was making a living selling on the blood of people that had died at Ground Zero. Horrible. Let me play a little of this to talk about that very same thing about people supporting him.
Spark widespread interest, or even, as we see here, gain like a cult-like following. And this isn't just a modern development or a new trend either. It predates the internet.
To what do you attribute the fixation on Mangione? Is there any one thing? Is it a variety of things? Just break that down for me.
It's absolutely not just one thing. It's certainly a mix of things, such as societal influences, human psychology, and cultural trends. But in the case of Mangione, there are a couple of things that do stand out above others. So for the first example of this is his actions do tap into widespread frustrations of many in society. And there are some individuals who may feel a type of kinship with him or view him as a symbol of resistance against unpopular organizations. But there is also this documented phenomenon, particularly women who are primary consumers of true crime. These individuals develop romantic fixations about these criminals or on these criminals, and they are heavily influenced by physical appearance, which then distorts, unfortunately, their perceptions of the individual and overshadow any acknowledgement of their violent crimes or violent acts.
Is this a little bit more extreme than we have seen, kind of going back to what we were talking about previous people being, enamored with accused criminals? When you're talking about someone getting a tattoo of a suspect's face with those words on it that were allegedly found in a note or manifesto, so to speak, is that a little bit more extreme than we've seen in the past?
I think that the intensity of this behavior has definitely escalated, and largely as a result of the age of just social media. Digital platforms currently or certainly amplify visibility, and what they do as well is foster parasocial relationships. And what that means is that there are followers who feel a very strong emotional connection to someone who doesn't even know who they are. So I think that what we're seeing is it's much different than it was in the past, and it can quickly snowball. So one person's post on social media or video can inspire essentially a chain reaction where others join in, and ultimately a fan base or a fan community is generated of some sort. So I think it's really here in this case the collective engagement that really makes it more extreme compared to what it was in the past.
You touched on this already, but I want to dive just a little bit deeper into this. The fascination with crime, that includes crime novels, popular true crime podcasts. Is that anything new? Because you're hearing a lot more about them fairly recently, but is that anything new?
So the fascination with crime itself isn't new. I think it's deeply rooted in human curiosity as well as culture. I think historically we've seen the public really enamored by certain things, such as public executions or cases like Jack the Ripper back in the 19th century. So what I think is what's changed is not really our interest in how our interest in crime, but how technology essentially has reshaped how we engage with these individuals. So as you mentioned today, I think streaming platforms, podcasts, social media, all of that has really made true crime content a little bit more immersive, and users and consumers find it more accessible.
I imagine, though, and this is something I want to get your take on, that there are maybe ethical concerns when you think about this as a whole, when you step back and look at the fact that we're talking, in some cases, we do have convicted killers and things of that nature. Obviously, Mangione right now is charged with murder, but has not gone to court. He has not gone to trial. He's just accused at this point. But there are some maybe ethical portions to this, right?
Certainly. And I think, as we all know, point blank, America does have some sort of true crime addiction. And I think what's really important to recognize that, like any addiction, this type of addiction definitely has distinct symptoms. So emotional obsession with the subject, in this case, Luigi, or the subject matter. And some have a really tough time disconnecting from this type of content. But while this might seem harmless to some, there are, as you mentioned, significant ethical concerns. I think one of those concerns in particular is that this fascination almost with these types of criminals and real life tragedies could potentially lead to the exploitation of victims and families. And what happens in that case is they are unfortunately re-traumatized or re-victimized. So this is definitely a big concern. And we saw this happen really clearly in the release of Netflix's Jeffrey Dahmer series. And I think when we're seeing a lot of this engagement on social media and individuals playing armchair detective from the comfort of their homes, there has been incidents where there are innocent people involved or accused of certain crimes. And so their involvement in the justice system is unfair in a sense. So a lot of ethical concerns, I think, just to give some advice here, is that I think it's really important to first and foremost honor the victims. And I think that we need to acknowledge them more in the process.
So, I mean, she said so many things there that were so correct, so right on. Dr. Prezalowski, she's a criminal justice professor. The fact that many high-profile true crime cases have people on the other side of the fence that identify with the suspect. And we've seen that in the Brian Koberger case in Idaho, the accused murderer of 4 students. There's a whole contingent of people that think he's innocent and he's being framed. Just as this, there's a whole contingent of young people. They say 40% of young people think that he should get off, and they admire him, and he did the right thing. That's a little bit scary, Professor Mike.
Bill, it's not a new phenomenon. I mean, I remember hearing stories about people going to the crime scene where Bonnie and Clyde were killed and dipping their handkerchief in the blood of Bonnie and Clyde, or John Dillinger, or people thinking Murph the Surf, the very handsome jewel thief, was like Cary Grant or some sort of great A-list actor in Hollywood. They thought he was a celebrity. People want to romanticize things because they don't want to see the cold-bloodedness of some sort of criminal act that involves a firearm or stabbing somebody to death, shooting somebody to death. They just look at it takes place and this person's got this personality and there's some meaning. No, cold-blooded murder is cold-blooded murder. You've seen it, I've seen it, Phil's seen it. We've gone to these scenes as a police officer, as a detective, as a sergeant. It's nothing like seeing somebody dying on the streets at 3 o'clock in the morning, shot in the head, and all the juice from their brains are leaking out with their blood. To give you a real good idea of what murder is. Sitting in your armchair in the comfort of your living room, playing with your keyboard, thinking that somebody is handsome. Where does that go? What do you do with that sort of information? Where do you go with that perspective? You can't really go anywhere with it because it's not facing the reality of the situation that person engaged in. And that's really sad. That's really, really sad.
So we were looking as Mike was talking, we're looking on the screen of Luigi Mangione walking toward a transport van that was going to take him to 26 Federal Plaza. They're already downtown at the Wall Street heliport. You see a lot of people wearing FBI, NYPD. That's the Joint Terrorist Task Force. They work together. Members of the NYPD Detective Bureau and members of the FBI work together. And that was put together after 9/11, the Joint FBI, NYPD Terrorist Task Force. And the NYPD detectives are deputized as federal marshals so that they can also go into any state in the United States and have police powers. So really excellent unit. And it's a great idea because there is a lot of underlying animosity between the two agencies, the NYPD and the FBI. And to point that out, maybe some politicians would deny that it's absolutely 100% true. And but it's a good thing that the NYPD and the FBI does have this joint terrorist task force. Professor Detective Phil.
He promoted me last week. Now I'm a professor. Listen, real quick. Pauline Rabbi in the chat says, kind of like a Charles Manson followers. Mm-hmm. Think about that. This is the 2024 version of Charles Manson's family. If people are standing behind this coward, because he is a coward, he's a killer. It's disgusting. It's terrible to think that there are people standing with signs saying "Free Luigi" and standing behind him online. Trying to give him support. I believe there was a GoFundMe page which had about $100,000 raised in a short period of time for his defense. I think that was taken down, but we can't, as a society, condone any type of violence, specifically murder. Walking up to an individual at 6:44 in the morning and pumping bullets into his back. It's just not who we are as a country, who we are as a civilization. We're a civilized country, and we cannot have this kind of behavior. There's no reason, and I get the outrage, I get the frustration. Personally, I've never felt an insurance company turning me down for healthcare. However, I do sympathize with those people, but you cannot have a Wild West atmosphere where you're going to shoot someone in this particular case, in the back like that. Very cowardice. We talked about it before. There's ways of having your voice heard, electing the politicians that are going to fight for you, protest, letter writing. We talked about that before. And, it's a little frustrating when you know from a law enforcement perspective, as we do from this show, how things go and, right from wrong. And then you would think that there would be so much of an atmosphere or a belief that, this guy belongs in jail for what he did. He took the life of an innocent human being. And, that person, the family is going to suffer, the children, the wife, the other family members. There's never going to be closure for them. And you may think he's responsible, Brian Thompson, that is, for maybe turning down people's health care or whatever. However, there's another way to get justice in that regard. This is not the way for justice. This was an injustice that was done to him, and his family and his friends are going to have to live with that for the rest of their lives. And unfortunately, there's another victim, Luigi's family. His family and friends are going to have to live with this, and it's terrible on both ends. There's losers on both ends, and we have to do better as a society, as a nation, to not support this type of stuff.
Absolutely. Richard W. from the chat, if you want to understand it, I think you need to go back a little further than the 1960s, like to the French Revolution. Well, possibly. There's always been a radical thought. There's always been people that have acted upon radical thought. People have suggested that violence can change things very quickly. And there's some truth to that. However, it's not the right way to try to change things, to use violence. And I think we're right-minded people, righteous people, I think, were horrified by this assassination. Professor Mike.
Yeah, Bill, there's no excuse for it. We've talked about this. You can say, okay, you can justify this one because Mr. Thompson stood for something bad. Well, what about an individual doctor, an individual nurse? What about a judge in a case? What about a police officer? What about a person who owns a car company, the CEO of Ford or anything like that? You start going down the slippery slope. At some point, you're going to say, well, no, we can kill these people, but we can't kill that person. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's either absolutely right, and then you have anarchy, or it's absolutely wrong, and we settle our differences and fix things in society through legal means and through nonviolent means. This is sad. It's sad. Everybody loses. Everybody loses when there's this sort of action. Nobody wins. The people who are going to get a tattoo with his name on it and his face on it, and the word deny, delay, whatever. 5 years from now, are you going to feel the same way? Like, point to your arm and say, "Look, I'm so proud of this." What are you doing? Like, people need to keep their perspective on life, and they get carried away emotionally with this. This murder means something special. It's not a murder. It's a righteous termination of someone's life. Really? Like, it's really sad. There's nowhere to go with this. There's nowhere to go with this if you think this is a good thing. It's really sad.
Absolutely. Folks, just to recap, this morning, Luigi Mangione had a hearing in Pennsylvania. His attorneys waived extradition. He was brought to a Pennsylvania airport. He was flown by private jet, we believe, to an airport out on Long Island, potentially Republic Airport in Farmingdale. They didn't announce the airport that they landed in. From there, he was met by an NYPD helicopter. He was flown to the Wall Street heliport. From there, he was taken down, we believe, to 26 Federal Plaza, where he would be arraigned on federal charges. And tonight, he's going to stay at the exclusive Rikers Island Hotel, awaiting additional court proceedings. Guys, your final thoughts, Phil, you first.
My final thoughts are this. This is a very, very intriguing case. I'm so glad to be plugged into it. Our instincts, you have like about 75 years of police experience with police off the cuff here. And I think that we have a good combination. Bill being a retired homicide sergeant, Professor Mike is a little bit more even-keeled, and he has that legal mind since he's a professor and a lawyer. And I that did the kind of work that these investigators are doing. So you get a good balance here from police off the cuff. I just wanted to mention that. And I think that if you want a police perspective, this is the show for that type of a perspective. I want to mention a couple of names. We've had people that have been in the chat and big fans of ours. There's a lot of them, but I'm going to mention a few. Carol Grayson, Kim Alliston, Maui Swift, the Pranzos, Peter and his wife, Richella, and Sergeant Melinda. Those are just a few names. We need our supporters. We need our fans. We need our subscribers. This is what keeps us growing. We're able to continue to do this type of stuff, give people the content that we give them. We want to stay plugged into this case. We give a lot of professional opinion here, and you're going to get, like I said, you're going to get a good balance. You got Bill sending out the orders, you got Mike talking about the legal end of it, and you got me explaining of what the detectives do. So that's kind of police off the cuff, real crime stories. Let's hope that everybody has a great Christmas, a great New Year, and better things for 2025. I'm so glad to be plugged into this case. And real quick, one other thing. There was a young lady, I pronounced her name wrong. It wasn't Rab, it's Rob. She corrected me on that. And thank you for being a subscriber and a listener.
Professor Mike.
Just that hope that people are going to be safe and healthy this holiday season, and that everybody is doing well. And just patience, and we'll see justice, hopefully justice for Luigi, justice for the Thompson family, justice for the people in New York that, had to witness this sort of horrific thing. And perhaps in the end of the day, no matter who gets the case, the feds or it stays in the state, hope that justice is done.
Absolutely. Very well said. Folks, I want to thank everyone for tuning in this afternoon. We're going to stay plugged into this case. We want everyone to have a wonderful holiday season. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Feliz Navidad. Prospero año. Felicidad. I learned that whole first thing from that whole first line from Jose Feliciano. Anyway, have a great holiday season on behalf of myself, Phil Grimaldi, and Professor Mike Geary. Have a great day, everyone. God bless. See you next time.
Stay safe, everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.